When I was a very little boy, I used to go with my mother when she shopped for eggs. And because I saw so many eggs, I thought I knew a lot about them. You couldn't tell me anything about eggs that I didn't already know. For instance, I knew that eggs were white, or sometimes brown, and I knew that they were laid by chickens. And I knew that there had to be a rooster, a father chicken, to fertilize the eggs if babies were going to grow inside and hatch from them. That was how there got to be more chickens in the world. That was what I knew about eggs. And I thought it was all there was to know. But then I met a boy who told me that chickens weren't just chickens. They were birds, something like the birds that fly through the air. And I thought that if chickens hatch from eggs, then all the other kinds of birds must hatch from eggs too. So I watched birds. And I read books about birds. And I learned a lot about them. The same way that chickens hatch from big white or brown eggs. Robins hatch from little blue eggs. Ducks hatch from lighter colored eggs. And seagulls from green eggs with spots. Meadowlarks hatch from whitish eggs with red spots. And plovers from whitish eggs with gray spots. Sandpipers from little eggs. And ostriches from very big eggs. And then one day, I asked my mother if all birds lay eggs. And she told me that only the mother bird, the female, lays them. Before they're laid, the father bird, the male, fertilizes them. Inside an egg, a baby bird starts out as a very small thing that doesn't look like a bird at all. The baby grows, using the egg yolk as its food. Then, in time, it breaks out of its shell. It lives and eats, and in a while it becomes a grown-up, adult bird. That was what I learned about eggs. And for a long time, I thought it was all there was to know. But then I met a girl who told me that birds aren't the only animals that hatch from eggs. She said that a lot of snakes and lizards and animals like that hatch from eggs, too. Well, I didn't know about that. So I watched lizards and snakes. And I read books about them. And I learned a lot about them. Most snakes lay eggs. Eggs with shells, something like birds' eggs. And baby snakes hatch from them. Lizards lay eggs, too, and so do turtles. And they look like chickens' eggs, except that the shells are much softer. And, of course, baby turtles hatch from them. Anyway, that was what I learned about eggs. And for a long time, I thought I was kind of an egg expert. But then my teacher got some pets for our classroom, frogs. Now, I knew a mother frog wasn't a bird, and I knew it wasn't a snake or that kind of animal, so it couldn't lay eggs. But it did. It laid them underwater. And the father frog stayed close by to fertilize the eggs. Well, they were very little eggs, all stuck together, and they didn't have hard shells like the eggs I already knew about, but they were eggs. And the mother frog didn't sit on them or watch over them, but after a long while, they hatched. Well, the babies didn't look like birds, snakes, or lizards, but they didn't look like frogs either. And I learned that some animals that hatch from eggs look different from their mothers and fathers. But they eat and grow And in a while, they begin to look like their mothers and fathers. And so I read books, and I learned that's how it is with frogs. And that's how it is with another kind of animal called salamanders. When salamander eggs hatch, the babies look different from grown-up animals. So then I thought I knew everything there was to know about eggs. My head was full of things about eggs. I thought I could tell people anything about eggs. That was before I met our neighbor, and he showed me his fish. His fish had laid eggs. They looked something like frog eggs, and our neighbor told me that nearly all fish come from eggs. Little fish in fish bowls, and big fish that swim in lakes, rivers, and oceans. Well, there sure were plenty of animals that hatched from eggs, I thought. There were fish. There were snakes and animals like that. Frogs and animals like that. And there were birds. And I thought I knew about all of them. But then I met a farmer who had bees. And he told me that bees were insects. And they kept their eggs in their beehives. Well, I didn't know they hatched from eggs. So I watched insects. And I read books about insects. And I learned a lot about them. In every beehive, only one female, the queen bee, lays eggs in the honeycomb. Well, bees lay eggs in their hives, and mosquitoes lay eggs on water. Grasshoppers lay eggs that are brown, and many ants lay eggs that are white. Ants are like bees. Only the queen lays the eggs. Some moths lay their eggs on twigs and leaves, and some flies lay theirs on garbage or decaying stuff. Boll weevils lay their eggs in little holes they make in cotton plants. And walking sticks, those little insects that look like sticks, lay theirs on bushes or trees. A walking stick lays tiny eggs, about the size of a pinhead. And when one hatches, a baby walking stick looks like a grown-up walking stick. But not all insects are like that. A baby fly is a tiny worm-like animal that looks very different from a grown-up fly. And baby mosquitoes swimming in the water don't look much like grown-up mosquitoes that can fly. And who would imagine that an animal that looks like this when it is very young would grow to be a moth? But I knew about them. By then, I knew a lot about animals that hatched from eggs and the kinds of eggs they hatch from. And I still remember it now, when I'm grown up. But, you know, just yesterday, I met a man who told me about another kind of animal that hatches from an egg. A platypus. It lives in Australia. Someday I'm going to watch a platypus. I've already started to read books about it, and I'll find out. I'll find out everything there is to know about animals that hatch from eggs.